Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. Welcome to the overview of a special 9-part housing series starting in February, thanks in part to support from Pinnacle Financial Partners. The series will feature a deep focus on unhoused communities with the aim to educate, tell enriching stories, and generate live responses to the solutions and issues you may think only affect those in the lowest income brackets. Now, for years, the WPLN News Desk has been keeping an eye or eyes on the housing situation in Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Here with me now is Tony Gonzalez, newsroom director at WPLN. Tony, it's good to have you on the show again.
Thanks. Great to be back.
Okay, so your voice is familiar to longtime listeners of WPLN, but you're new to the role of news director. Tell us a bit about your history with the station.
Yeah, right. So I joined as a reporter, so not an editor or a director of any type. I was a news reporter. I covered City Hall a lot, mayoral administrations, Metro Council. I've also heard me doing our Curious Nashville series where we answer questions from people. Over the years, I've also just worked on some of our more ambitious work, like the series, the projects, and even our investigative reporting. Through all of that, the team here has spent a lot of time really doing serious journalism, trying to understand the big issues in our community, like what you're talking about with housing. It can also be the legislature, the policy at the city council, transportation, quality of life, all of that stuff, but definitely housing and affordability in my entire time in Nashville has been like a huge issue.
Now, housing, we're going to be focusing there. It's such a sprawling topic. How do the reporters and editors decide which housing stories to cover?
Yeah, right. I mean, if you say housing, you could mean a lot of different things, right? So it could just mean home ownership, like what's the housing market like? So, that's where you've kind of got the stats about how much does the house cost, the sales, or like what's the housing stock, how much inventory, that kind of stuff. So we do keep tabs on that. You might also mean like how's it going for renters? Rent prices just like going crazy. Then there's also looking at affordable housing and the policies or programs that try to make more affordable housing in the city. So we also cover that. And then, of course, there's all the layers of homelessness and encampments and what the policies are there, which I know your team has had a lot of eyes on. So WPLN does stories about all of the above, all of those different layers or angles on housing. One thing that we're often looking for when we decide to do a housing story is we ask this question: what is new or different, or what has changed? What is something that we're noticing that is new and different that needs some attention or some explaining, some unpacking? We also try to dig in, wherever there's like a specific policy or program where we can try to track, is it working? What has it had an impact on day-to-day life, that kind of thing.
So when you talk about housing programs, one of the big ones in Nashville is the Barnes Housing Trust Fund. Came up a lot over the past mayoral election. That's something you've covered for about a decade. What stands out to you about that?
Yeah, so the Barnes Fund did have their official milestone. They're 10 years of the Barnes Fund. I do remember when it was first launched in 2013. The fund is really one of the main ways that Metro as a government intentionally preserves or builds new affordable units. So the way this works, it's a grant program. They give the grants mostly to nonprofit housing developers, and then there's rules. They have to cap the rent or the sales price on those housing units. So like these are going to be affordable units. They're going to stay affordable for decades. For me, it is really interesting to see the results of that program. Like I got to see it launch when it was a brand new thing, the first time we'd ever heard of the Barnes Fund. For me, it's really interesting to get to see some results of that program, and it really does take time to build housing units. So when I was getting ready to talk to you about this, I looked back at a story that I did in 2017. I actually went out to an empty lot in North Nashville with Kay Bowers. She's a nonprofit developer. Her group was getting ready to build some affordable units with the Barnes Fund housing money, and this is what that sounded like.
So we've lost a lot of modest, lower-income housing. It's gone, and now the housing that's gone up is the prices are over 300, well over 300,000.
Bowers runs the nonprofit New Level Community Development Corporation. It's a wing of the Mount Zion Church. With a grant from the Barnes Housing Fund and the gift of this lot, it'll become one of 5 homes her group is building.
The idea is to keep the property affordable long term so that we don't lose so much housing stock. It's to kind of stop the bleeding, so to speak.
So in that spot, like those houses that she was talking about, which it used to be an empty lot, there are now houses there. They've been built and they're going to be affordable. So you can see that there's, something has happened in this space. And if we zoom out a little bit, officials now say the Barnes Fund has given out about $100 million in 10 years. And that has created 4,000 rental units and 400 homes for sale. So they have been building.
That sounds like some real impact.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it also depends who you ask. So housing advocates, they're going to say, 4,000 affordable units, that's good. But there have also been studies over the years suggesting that Nashville needs to be building several thousand affordable units every year.
Okay.
So the clock is ticking on that. But yeah, we're definitely seeing these units being built. The Barnes Fund is one of the ways.
Now, another huge player in housing is the MDHA, the Metro Development and Housing Agency. They build and oversee federally subsidized housing, so public housing. This is another area that WPLN has covered closely. What coverage there are you most proud of?
Yeah, for this, we have to talk about season 1 of The Promise. This is Maribel Knight's long-form podcast. For season 1, she spent months and months getting to know residents at the James Casey homes. That's in East Nashville. If you're familiar with Maribel's recent work, The Kids of Rutherford County, definitely go back and revisit this first season where she spends, the serious time here getting to know folks. And what she found was that a lot of the MDHA apartments, these public housing units, were in really rough shape. And that as the agency was getting ready to tear some of those down and rebuild a lot more brand new units, which sounds like a really good thing, it was still going to be really disruptive for residents. Those disruptions were going to play out over several years.
We have an excerpt from The Promise that shows what it's like for residents. This is a moment where Miss Vernell McHenry, she had to decide whether to stay in her apartment, which had a nice porch where she would hang out and watch neighbors, or move to a brand new unit. But it didn't have that stoop. Let's listen.
We went to the grand opening of Barrett Manor, Casey's first new building in more than half a century.
There's a lot of people already down here. I'm glad I didn't know the address.
It was a big deal. The building with 70 apartments, mostly for seniors and the disabled, was the first big step in Casey's redevelopment. On the tour, there was even a woman who broke down in tears, overwhelmed by how nice everything was. And initially, Miss Vernell was really excited about Barrett Manor, too.
It's just so beautiful. I don't know how to act. I'm like a child in a new candy store.
But after realizing there was no place to sit outside and connect with her neighbors, she began to worry that she'd feel shut in by the tiny apartment. Ultimately, she decided not to move into the new building. Nearly a full year later, I caught up with Miss Vernell on a warm, sunny afternoon in early spring. And as usual, she was sitting outside, this time in front of Casey's community center.
Oh, it's so nice out.
It's beautiful. It is beautiful. So how are you doing this beautiful day?
I'm good, yeah. I wanted to, I'm just following up, like, what's new?
Well, I have a new home. Good morning. Good morning. All right.
She had to move into a new apartment. At least it was new for her.
Well, I had to move into because we had a bad sewage problem under my building, under and next to my building, and so I had to, all right, how you doing? So I had to move out because they condemned the building.
Old pipes broke, and the leak was so bad that everyone in her block of apartments, 8 in total, had to get out.
Hi, Miss Gloria.
Mm-hmm. I like your new hair, girl.
So
it was the sewage. The sewage was the odor and the bacteria or whatever was coming into my apartment, and so they condemned the building.
And didn't they offer you a spot in the new building again?
Yes, they offered me a spot in the new building, but I didn't want to take it. I still didn't want to take the new building. Not yet.
So after everything Miss Vernell had been through, she ended up moving anyway. But she still declined a spot in Barrett Manor, choosing instead another old, dimly lit unit in the project, across the street from her old apartment. But at least she kept her stoop that she was so concerned about.
One of the things that reporting like this can really do is put you out there, like next to someone in the real world as they're dealing with challenges and making those decisions. So it's not just about covering the housing market, the statistics, the programs. It's about learning what's really happening for people out in the world.
Now, tell me more about the kind of coverage. What kind of coverage WPLN, the newsroom, is going to be looking at moving forward?
Yeah, well, housing and the affordability of housing are still major challenges for the city. In fact, in survey after survey and polls, we see people ranking housing affordability as like a top concern. More recently, I think we've been, making sure to include more information about rent trends. Like in our newscasts, you'll hear those statistics as rents increase, how Nashville compares to other cities with a really hot rental market. So we're definitely covering that. I know the city has also created this, they call it a dashboard about affordable housing and demographics and what's going on. I think that's something that our reporters will be keeping an eye on. And then one of the other big policy areas is how the city and the state will approach homelessness and encampments, which I know you mentioned earlier, and how to transition people from unhoused spaces into permanent housing. So that's something that I'm looking forward to a lot more coverage of.
You got the perfect title for a series on renting. The rent is too damn high.
Hard to argue with that.
That's right. Tony Gonzalez is WPLN's news director. Tony, thanks for taking time to sit down with us.
Yeah, you bet.
We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk with two people whose shared passions for working with the unhoused community and journalism created an opportunity for others and a meaningful friendship. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Colonna, and this is Nashville. Housing and homelessness. These are two of the biggest issues we face here in Middle Tennessee. In February, This Is Nashville will be launching a project on housing, focusing on the unhoused community. The project is made possible in part thanks to support from Pinnacle Financial Partners. One of the leaders of the project is Judith Tackett, who has worked for years as the director of Metro Homeless and Impact Division. She's now an independent consultant with Tackett Consulting and a former guest of the show. I'd like to welcome her back. Judy, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Okay, so first tell me this. Let's go back. When did you first move to Nashville?
I came here in 1995 and have experienced all the growth of Nashville. So, yeah, I moved here to study at Belmont University.
What was your first impressions of the city?
I loved Nashville, and I had been visiting and was in downtown and hanging out at the first coffee shop, and I loved it and it was exciting, not realizing how dead downtown really was. And then what I liked is the small feel. I felt comfortable. Coming from a small village in another country, coming here, it was still manageable as a city. It wasn't overwhelming, and I felt I could grow along with the city.
So the city has grown quite a bit. How do you feel about that growth?
It's exciting. It's also, I like situations where there are opportunities, where we can grow and where we can form what change can look like. Especially also when I worked in Metro, I liked that type of startup. What can we do? How can we collaborate? And that's always been the feel in Nashville and still is. We have to be careful how we grow, but it's something that we together as a community can still form.
Now, I understand when you came to Nashville back in 95, you came to study journalism, correct? Yes,
correct.
What is your interest? What led you towards a degree in journalism?
So my background, I grew up in Switzerland. Everything is really nice and, and perfect. And
It's like one of the happiest countries, right?
I think so, yes. So I was all happy, all of that, and went to the first trip alone with the parents in my teens was to South Africa. It was still apartheid. Mm-hmm. And I was able and had an opportunity to visit a township. And I knew at that point already I wanted to write, I wanted to be a journalist. And at that point I decided I wanted to talk about the ills of the world, this idealistic, hey, this story needs to be told. These people are hidden from the tourism. I'm a tourist here and I had this opportunity to see it. That's the type of journalism I want to do. There was no journalism school in Switzerland at that point, and I had been visiting Nashville before. I was like, I know the city a little bit. I have some friends here. I'm going to go and study at Belmont University.
What was your first journalism gig here?
There was a startup in 2000 called The City Paper, and I was one of their first reporters.
Okay. When did you make the decision let me phrase it like this. When did you make the connection to homelessness and covering that in your work?
So because of that experience in South Africa, I was adamant. I just told myself, we need to, as journalists, we have kind of a responsibility to use our platform and cover some stories of people that are overlooked. And it was homelessness and foster care that I was focusing on and trying to find a story and write a story about either one of them once a month, just to consistently do that. And that's how I really got into the issues of homelessness, what's going on in the city, what is city government doing, what is the state, what is the federal government doing, and really started to get into it that way.
Was there one event as a journalist that stood out to you when you covered homelessness?
Yes, and I actually really had to think. It was exactly 20 years ago in 2004 when then Governor Bredesen announced an interagency council on homelessness. And everybody met at Room in the Inn. So Charlie Strobel, of course, was there, governors, representatives, commissioners. There was out of the White House representatives were there, local government. I mean, all these leaders, activists, nonprofit leaders, everybody was in that room and people experiencing homelessness. And it was a celebration and it was impressive. And I was sitting in the back and I was just, as a journalist, watching. And then the cameras turned off, the event was done, and the bickering started. It really stood out to me with we celebrating, we are together in a room, the cameras are on. But then when the cameras turn off, we all have the same goals. And yet we focus on sometimes how, we're just not on the same page in how to do things and how to approach things. And that's kind of stood out to me and that stuck with me, that we just need to really always remember that bottom line, when we have the same goals, we need to find the commonalities that we can work together.
I mean, you've gone on to expand beyond journalism to working for the city and things, but this experience, seeing that when the cameras are on, everyone's playing nice, and it's a nice photo op, let's say. The lights turn off. The bickering starts of the process of how do we get to this goal that we all share, different paths, different philosophies, different methods. How did that experience impact your decision-making as you moved on to leadership roles, working for the government and different institutions?
Listening. For me, fundamentally, finding that common ground and really understanding where people come from, whatever their background is, what is their motivation to be in this field, because everybody has a personal story and truly, truly believes we can change something around homelessness and help people. And so let's just start with listening to each other, find that common ground, and focus on a common goal that we can work towards.
How hard is that, to get people to listen to each other?
It's hard, but it's just a lot of one-on-one. It's a lot of relationship building. It's a lot of that trust building, that fundamental trust. Even if we disagree, we know we find a common project that we can work together.
I find it interesting because building that trust is so important, yet when you're dealing with people's passions, people's beliefs, people's ideals, sometimes they guard those, as closely as they do their most valued personal secrets. Building that trust is vitally important. Have there ever been an instance where you were challenged in building trust with others?
Yes, of course. I can't think of a specific instance right now, but sometimes it's also where, one situation I remember where I was actually really in disagreement with somebody. And then we were like, okay, let's put a break on that. Let's focus on this other issue. And because we had this fundamental, hey, we can work together, and we both trusted each other wants the best, we could work on that project and pick the other one up 2 days later when we all calmed down.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to go back just a little bit. How did you get from journalism to working for Metro government?
I was, as a journalist, working with government and departments, and really met with the department heads and with the frontline staff and just listened to them. Again, I didn't do a story necessarily, just what do you do, and learn with them one-on-one. And then when I became a freelancer, I was asked to help out with some newsletters or annual reports. That's kind of how I got into it. And then back then there was a relatively new Metropolitan Homelessness Commission that asked me to do this regularly, hired me part-time. And so I got into that more and more until I was full-time hired in 2011.
Okay, you did that work for a long time. Tell me this. What is your why?
I believe that that government has the means to bring people together. We don't always, in leadership changes, there is a co-leadership, I think, around homelessness that needs to happen. That's really, really important. And I just believe government has a natural platform to see where opportunities are that sometimes a nonprofit doesn't have the same platform to, reach across the community and bring everybody together. And I always felt government, for me, it really resonates to think about public servants and what that means. And local government is really at the core of that. That's where people live. That's where you build communities. Local government doesn't always have to be the leader in everything, but can be a co-lead or bring the leaders together to give them that platform and collaborate.
All right. Now, joining us now is a very familiar name to listeners. Tasha A.F. Lemley is a longtime journalist who's focused on housing and homelessness in her career. She's also the senior producer. This is Nashville. Tasha, welcome to this side of the show.
Hello, Khalil.
Hey. Okay. So talk to me about your photojournalism background. How'd you get started?
Yeah, so I think I got started photographing in high school. I wanted to do, this is the 90s, I'm going to age myself there, but wanted to do, the Gothic cemetery photos. Yeah. So I think that's how I started. And then did go on to college to a photojournalism career. One of my first projects was Waffle House After Midnight. And that was when you could still smoke there, so it was... that was a really good era of Waffle House, but that's sort of how my photojournalism started. That's what got me in. I think even in those two projects I just mentioned, there's a bit of subculture. There's a bit of, these worlds that I wanted to see a little bit more closely.
When did you move to Nashville?
So I moved to Nashville in 2002. So I've been here. We're looking at 22 years. Yeah.
Okay. So how did you get accustomed to being here in Nashville? What did you do to find your place here?
Oh, yeah. So I still don't know if I found my place here, but in 2002, I really didn't have my place here. I had come hoping to make a living as a graphic designer. So I had learned enough in the photojournalism program to do basic layouts and really enjoy that visual art. So thought, at that time, you really do think you're going to get out of college and get the job. I wanted to make $36,000. That's what I thought I was going to make. My sights were set really high. So I had applied something like 24 places and had a dozen interviews and didn't get hired anywhere. And then finally got one offer for Kinko's downtown. It was 3rd and Broadway. So that is where I landed. And talking about finding my place, I felt really lost. I felt overlooked. I felt this is not what I'm in this city for. I at a Kinko's, no offense to FedEx Kinko's, but it's like that's not that's not where I'd hoped to be. And so I even cried on my way to work the first day. So I lived in Antioch at the time. So I'm driving, on the interstates. We're much more clear. Like, I don't remember it being packed. I'm heading in and crying. And yeah, so that's sort of the first place I landed, was at that little corner.
So you're at the corner working at Kinko's.
Yeah.
Kind of upset about it, looking for other things. So what were your passions at that time? I know photography and graphic design were your passions, but was working with the unhoused community a passion at that time?
No. I don't know for sure that I had ever talked to someone who was homeless. I did not know that I had ever engaged with someone who had formerly been homeless. And that kind of snuck up on me.
Okay, so was there a moment where, like, your passion for this work kind of met your personal life? What kicked off this interest and passion for working with homeless people?
Oh, yeah. There's an exact moment where I'm driving in to work one day, feeling sorry for myself, and thinking, what do I need to do? I'm someone who loves to ask for advice. I love to talk to people who know more than I do, because I only know what can fit in a thimble. And it occurs to me on my way in one day, there's a little parking lot behind Kinko's where we used to park, or what used to be Kinko's. And there was a unhoused man who lived on the bench on that, 1 minute walk from the car to the door. And he came to mind, and I thought, he's there every day, and I never talked to him. He never talked to me. I think there was this perceived difference. We didn't see each other as equals, or we didn't see each other as people you would talk to. And, Khalil, like, if you and I saw each other at Dunkin' Donuts every day, grabbing our coffee, eventually I'm going to be like, I see you every day.
Hey.
Hey, do you work near? Do you live near here? What's up?
Yeah.
But because there was such a perceived difference between us, we never talked to each other. So this day, I'm like excavating my soul, and I'm early 20s, and I think, I'm going to do something really radical. I'm going to say hi to this guy. I'm in pain. This person knows more than I do about pain by appearances. And so I remember gripping the steering wheel. Like, I remember my hands on the wheel, and I am terrified. I'm going to talk to this guy. I mean, I grew up in a middle-class family in northern Alabama, and one of the things you don't do as a young woman is talk to homeless men. But I really felt compelled to this day. So I parked the car. I walked up to him. I stuck my hand in his face, and it startled him. He was looking down, and he popped up, and I said, "Hi, I'm Tasha." And he said, "Hi, I'm Dawn." And we shook hands, and I thought of something to ask him that day. And I walked in, and over the next few days, I would think of something to ask Dawn every day. Like, I didn't know anything. Like, where do you sleep at night? Or what do you pray for? And finally, I was inspired to photograph him. So that's where the big connection is made. I asked him if I could photograph him, and I did some photos. This was film, but because I was at Kinko's, I could scan them in and print them out and do my own little creative work, and gave him some of the pictures. And then he gave those pictures to an outreach worker who I didn't even know what those were, with MDHA. And the outreach worker came into Kinko's one day, stuck these photos in my face, and said, "Did you do this?" And I'm scared. I'm scared a lot in a lot of my stories. And I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, "Would you like to do more?" And I said, "Absolutely." And this man was Lee Mitchell at the time at MDHA. And so I started shadowing Lee and photographing people living on the streets.
What was that experience like?
Yeah, so at first, again, terrified. This was early 2000s, and I traveled around on foot with Lee to a Campus for Human Development room in the inn. And it was much, if you've been there, it was much different looking at the time. There was kind of a chain fence out back, like a pen that everybody would kind of hang out and sit in. And I remember going to that pen for the first time and feeling really, just claustrophobic. And there were so many men. And then the one big turning point for me was I went with Lee one day to Riverfront Park, and we were talking to probably about 7 homeless men. And again, this was at night, and we're kind of surrounded, and I'm just like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I was told not to do. And then I relaxed a little, and I there was some sort of familiarity that I didn't understand. There was a sense of humor, a wit that was disarming. These men were very protective of me. They were very paternal and warm, and I thought, there's something familiar here. The type of intelligence, the sense of humor, the culture was familiar to me. And it wasn't until years later that I realized my own brother had been homeless. And they reminded me of him. Yeah.
What did that realization do for you?
Yeah, I knew growing up my brother had struggled with addiction, particularly alcoholism. I knew that he had done prison time more than once. I hadn't put it together. Nowadays I might start to, suppose that someone might have also experienced homelessness at some point with a certain number of other life experiences. I didn't know that about Mike. I didn't know that about my brother. And so that occurred to me. And we happened to intersect at the next Thanksgiving. We were at our Thanksgiving table, me and him and mom and dad. And normally he was pretty absent from my life. He was kind of missing a lot. If he wasn't incarcerated, I didn't know where he was. But we intersected this one Thanksgiving, and he refers to himself as us homeless people. And I just remember, my mind is blown. Like I didn't know that, I had wondered at that point, didn't know, and he confirmed it. And one of the most touching moments of my life was needed to drop him off at the rescue mission later that night. This is in Alabama. And he needed a bag to put his book. I think he had a book and maybe a shirt and a comb, and he didn't want to take those into the mission. And we'll be addressing this some in the show that Judy and I are launching. He didn't want those things to be stolen. They were precious to him. And so I remember my mom, she's a very tiny woman, 5 feet tall at the time. And I remember her down on the floor, digging under the kitchen sink, looking for the best plastic bag for her son to go stay at the mission so he could put this bag under a bush. And there was something about seeing my little mom, still mothering the only way she knew how in that moment was to find the best plastic bag. Yeah.
I can imagine that having this personal experience and now being here, kind of finding this opportunity to take photographs with these folks and launching yourself into that community, realizing the personal connection you had, probably grew the fire that you had, the passion that you had inside.
I think that's fair. I think I have tried to fix other people's brothers and fathers because I couldn't fix my own.
Now, you went on from taking photographs and you transitioned and you added the skill of doing audio recording in this work, which makes you so fantastic as our senior producer here for the show. How did you get started into that? What was that transition like?
Okay. So Lee Mitchell, the outreach worker I mentioned from MDHA, as he's transitioning out, he brings in another outreach worker, Will Connolly, and passes me off, I guess, with a job like, hey, take her along with you. She's better than a puppy. And so Will was all about the photography. He said, I want to record people's stories. That was, again, not something interesting to me at the time, but I wanted to do what this person who was letting me into this world, guiding me into this world, what they wanted. And so Will wanted to just go to Walgreens and get one of those little mini tape cassette recorders. This American Life was already out at the time, though, and I knew just enough to know this is not the way to do this. Okay. If we're going to do this, it needs to be digital. It needs to be archival. Like whatever we capture needs to be good. So I think I'd gone on transom.org and picked up a digital recorder and a condenser mic, and we started hitting the streets and just sitting down to listen to people.
Can we hear a little bit of that early audio?
Yeah. So we're going to hear from Bones, and Bones was well-loved. And I think in this clip, one of the things you're going to hear, Bones is full of life. And Will and I don't know in all of our interviews we ever asked anybody, so why are you homeless? It's not that we didn't care, but we didn't care. Mm-hmm. I want to tell me a scary story from when you were growing up. Tell me a sad story. What is your proudest accomplishment so far in your life? These are the things we wanted to know. But what I found, and I still use this to this day, once you stick a mic in someone's face, and maybe I'm an example of that now, once they feel comfortable, they just start rolling, and the most beautiful stuff comes out. Okay, so we're going to hear from Bones, and and hear about one of his passions.
Oh, I love trains. Oh, God, do I love trains. Best way in the world to travel. It is.
Why is that?
You just get you some water, some food, a couple of days of food, a couple of days of water. Take you a hammock, hang it in between the cargo rings, and kick back and listen to the radio. You know? And you wake up and you're where you want to be. You go to sleep just about anywhere in the southeast, man, in a day and a half. Like the hot shot from Gainesville to Evansville, you know, the get-off points and get-off points are anywhere in the United States except for Hawaii, man. Can't get there by train.
You know, he really sounds like he's at peace.
Yeah, he was a really kind man. He has since passed, just you can hear the daydreaming. I think you can hear him putting himself on one of those trains that just takes him wherever he wants to go.
Mm. Can we hear one more clip before we go to break?
Okay, yeah. So we're going to hear from a man named Cowboy. It was David Luttrell. He has also since passed. And if you were downtown anytime in the early 2000s, you might remember Cowboy. Glasses, long beard, cowboy hat, and he was a wheelchair rider and often had a little dog with him that may or may not make an appearance in this clip. So this is him. To set this up a little bit, he is complaining and kind of processing some of his thoughts about other people in the homeless community. And we do get interrupted partway, so you'll have to kind of listen closely.
Now, there's a percentage of them that are just users, but there's a large percentage of them that's had bad things go on. They got to have some help, and with help, they can cure their sin. You know, it don't take long to figure out who the users are. Keep going from one place to another place like a church hopper. You go from one place to another place, always looking for that handout, or the ones that are really taking the handout and using it. How do you do?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Sassy, how about yourself?
I'm doing great. I was down there just passing here to tell you guys. So just wanted to say hi.
This is Tasha.
Hi.
Judy Taggart from the City Paper.
Good to meet you.
Yeah, Judy.
Oh, I just interrupted you guys.
No.
It's fine.
I talked to you a time or two. Yeah, the City Paper's not giving us any good. Yeah, he knows the City Paper's not been good to homeless people. He knows.
So yes, this is the moment Judy and I meet.
Wow.
Judy, I happened upon this tape. Like out of maybe 30 hours of tape, I gasped out loud when I saw this. That like this is the moment you and I met 18 years ago. It is on tape.
I am a little bit in shock right now because I didn't expect that. And then also the story and the relationship that developed with Cowboy. So Cowboy and I had the same birthday. And so every July he came on our birthday with a cake, a strawberry cake, because I had at one point mentioned that was my birthday cake that my mom always made me in Switzerland. So every time he rolled into government office with that cake on my birthday and just handed it to me. So it's like, yeah.
He was kind of a polarizing figure. I think there's a lot of people that really hated Cowboy. There was a lot of us that really loved him. He was always kind to me. He was always happy to see me. He would sing. He was also very, very full of life until the day he died.
And he would tell you the truth and what he's thinking and what he's feeling and speak up. And it was really, I think, when you listen to people and really get to know them, and that's something we want to show in this series, is we all are nuanced. We all are, I mean, it's hopelessness, it's hopefulness all at the same time. And Cowboy is a good example of that. He could come into meetings and be really angry, or he could come in and be very thoughtful, and at the core was just a really good guy.
Sounds like Cowboy was this perfect spirit to bring you two together.
He was.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah. We have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll learn more about the special project on housing and homelessness and discover how the community can find solutions. You can always join the conversation by tweeting us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. We're talking about a special project on housing that will debut in February on This is Nashville. The series is here in part from help from Pinnacle Financial Partners. Now, here with me are two of the people who are heading up that project, Judith Tackett and Tasha A.F. Lemley. Thanks again to both of you for being here with us. Now, before the break, we learned a lot about your journeys in journalism and advocacy for the unhoused that led you two to meet each other. Now, I want to hear a little bit more about the project. But before then, Tasha, you went on from doing this work to found The Contributor, a paper that a lot of people out here in the city can purchase and read. Tell me a little bit more about that experience.
Yeah, so I think I had the right mix in 2007 of interest and skill to start a street newspaper in Nashville, The Contributor, and did that with my co-founder, Tom Wills, and a handful of other co-founders, including Will Connolly, who was mentioned earlier, who many, many, many years later is now the current executive director. That's a new thing. And so another weird little full circle moment in the small little big city we have here.
That's awesome.
And one more thing I wanted to clarify. We mentioned the Homeless Impact Division. We mentioned the Homelessness Commission. I'm sure they're breaking out in hives listening to this. Judy, what is the name of this government group now?
It is called the Office of Homeless Services. And another tidbit, so Will Connolly was the director of the Homelessness Commission. I worked for him, and then I became the director, and we turned it into the Homeless Impact Division, and now it's evolved to the Office of Homeless Services.
Okay. Now, this project that we're talking about here on the show today, it's been in the works for some time, right, Judy?
Yes. I think
like a couple years, 2 years?
Yes, we've been talking about what would it look like, what's the education piece, that needs to happen on some of the concepts when we talk about solving homelessness. And nationwide, there is a lot of disagreement on the best example is what Housing First is. And a lot of people still think it's a program. It's really a philosophy. It's like, what would it really mean to dig in what these concepts mean? What does it mean to solve homelessness? What are, looking behind the terminology, and then including the voices of the people and telling their stories and the diversity of what homelessness looks like in the nation, in the city, in the state. And it's not just the person on the streets that we see. It is way broader than that.
What is the title of the project? What's it called?
We're calling it In My Place.
Why did you decide on In My Place?
Because, Judy and I were batting around a bunch of different ideas, and on the phone, we were kind of zoning out. We're like, I'm running out of steam. And finally, one of us said the word place, and it kind of resonated with both of us, like place. There's something about that word that got us. And the phrase in my place, it can have different meanings depending on how you're using it. Like, he put me in my place.
Mm-hmm.
That means like something. But we often hear people who are about to get housed say, I've got my place,
mm-hmm.
or they're getting me a place. And then someone is in my place. So we just thought it was a beautiful phrase that over the next week continued to resonate with us. And so that's what we're going with.
And I like that because as a listener, so many people are looking at their place in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and listeners could recognize their place in our society, in our city, and what they can do to help. Something that I'm interested in. I want to find out what exactly you guys are going to go deeper in covering. But Judy, you said something about educating. You want to educate people on the depth and the reality of these issues. Is that really, why is education a focus of what you all are going to cover?
I think when we fundamentally want to solve something, we have to understand what is it that we're solving. And that includes education. And the term education I like because it's we learning together, and that's the hope of this series as well. It's like learning from each other and creating that space to learn from each other. And what does it mean? I like the name because it's also, what does it mean for each of us to belong somewhere where we can say, this is, I have found my place, I'm in my place. And it can be community. And fundamentally, I think when homelessness is solved, we have communities that work for each person, for all of us together.
Now, can you elaborate on a couple terms that I've come by? I've come by the term cross-sector and cross-systems collaboration. Elaborate, educate me on what those things mean.
When I am thinking about cross-sector, I'm thinking about nonprofit sector, I'm thinking government sector, I'm thinking faith sector, faith communities, and business communities. And when we all come together, we create community, and that's the cross-sector collaboration. Now, going to cross-systems, when I'm looking at what causes homelessness, for me, homelessness always has meant it's a housing status, it's a housing description. So the homelessness sector alone cannot solve the housing that's lacking. So you have to bring the affordable housing conversation very strongly to the forefront when we talk about this issue. But it's not just housing, it's also access to healthcare, education, other supports that needs to be in place, looking at systems, criminal justice systems that feed into homelessness. What are the issues? Why are people getting out of some institutions into homelessness and become homeless? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what this systems collaboration looks like.
Now, Judy, you have nearly 25 years experience in this city. Before we say goodbye, tell us this. As an expert, what are some of the changes we've seen around homelessness and where we are today?
So I'm looking at the national level. There's a lot of good conversations around going on. We know how to solve homelessness. We know Housing First works for chronic homelessness. We know housing needs to be the foundation. We know affordable housing conversations and homelessness conversations have to be hand in hand. We know all of this. I think that conversation has really changed over the last 20 years to really go and think about healthcare. Fundamentally, if you want to improve healthcare, people need to be in housing. That's kind of the main issues that have changed. And then at the local level, when we really looking at over the years, from the time I described in the earlier segment about people bickering with each other, it's like now the bickering is more around let's collaborate. There is this collaboration sense that when you build that up, it's still there. And there's a lot of collaboration going on and people trying to find their places in how do we work together. And those are really positive changes that we cannot forget and that we need to build up on. The other thing that really, really has changed is a data-driven approach. We need to measure what outcomes are at the system level and at the community level and then at the program level. And I think we've made great strides on that as well.
Now, Tasha, are we going to hear from unhoused people in this series?
We sure are. I think especially in the first episode, we're going to pack it with voices. There's a plan the plan is to pack it with voices who have experienced homelessness at some point. But every episode we're going to hear from someone who intimately knows what we're talking about through their own experience. Yeah.
Judy, what are you looking forward to the most for this project?
Really bringing home what in my place means to the different people that we're going to invite as guests, what it means to them and what it means to them in the sense of the community, and making sure that we have that voice from people with different backgrounds that have struggled in the affordable housing space.
I really want to thank you both for being here. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Khalil.
Thank you.
My guests were Judith Tackett and Tasha A.F. Limley, who are the masterminds behind the special project titled In My Place, a series that is made possible in part thanks to support from Pinnacle Financial Partners. Now, the series will be focusing on housing and homelessness. Judith and Tasha, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced and directed by Tasha A.F. Limley. Our board operator is Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are Laurent and Namir Blade. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. And the conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. Find us on Instagram and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil A. Colonna. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. And be good to each other.